Welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs YouTube channel. My name is Greg. I'm here with Brandon Scott, and we're bringing you another great video, so you're going to want to stay for this whole thing. Folks, if you have not yet, please make sure you subscribe to this video, and when you do, also make sure you hit that notification bell so you won't miss another video release. Because here's the thing, I hear some people who are like, wow, where have you been? I thought you had dropped off the face of the earth. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm literally trying to put out videos every single day, and you're just now seeing these videos. So make sure you have that notification bell picked. Anyway, enough of that. All right, so folks, just because it's the off season doesn't mean that we have nothing to talk about. All you have to do is simply follow social media, and Brandon, follow RG3, follow Jay Gruden, and they will give you plenty of enough stuff to talk about. And I tell you what, I was trying not to pick sides on this because I will totally admit, folks, I was really hoping I could snag one of those guys, if not both of those guys, like, hey, why don't you just come on the Maniacs and just have it out? We won't even pick sides. You just have it out. We're just going to sit back with that popcorn. Just keep it, clean. We're trying to, this is trying to be like a PG-ish, channel. But, just come on and hash it out and be done with it. And I think since then, Gruden has tried to kind of come out and smooth things over a little bit. But still, man, Brandon, they were throwing some bombs at each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of with you, man. I didn't want to pick sides. I had my opinions, obviously, but it kind of comes down to this, man. That situation, it's not really one person at fault for why RG3 and even Jay Gruden didn't succeed in DC. It was a combination of factors. A lot of it had to do with Dan Snyder. Do I believe that Jay Gruden was even a fit from the get-go? I don't believe so. I know that he, with his quarterback work as a coach in Cincinnati, it had a lot to do with them trying to work with RG3 with the fallout with Mike Shanahan. Looking at RG3, it's like I kind of lean towards Jay Gruden a little bit. I'm gonna tell you why. Because number one, RG3, he got given the keys very early. I mean, he was one of those quarterbacks, the quarterback really, but there's a numerous quarterbacks that we acquired that Dan Snyder kind of pushed us to get. And then if you look at the fact that we gave up so many assets at the draft to acquire RG3, I mean, if you look at how many picks that we sent to St. Louis, or at the time St. Louis, I mean, they panned out to be all pro guys. So we gave up a lot to get them. Obviously, it had a lot to do with injury. It's not always his fault with injury. Now, looking at the situation with the injury, yeah, you could say Mike Shanahan should have kept him out. RG3 should have stayed out. It's so many, and it's probably one of those things where it's behind the scenes. A lot happened behind the scenes that we don't know about. So I'm about to touch space on that. But let's be totally 100 here, man. He used to ride in the limousine with Dan Snyder to the game. Like, come on, man. He acts like a diva. He does. And like I said, the injuries, you can't really fault him for that. But, he never really even learned how to slide. Like, did he do the best he could as far as learning techniques to protect himself? No. He hasn't. He lowered his shoulder pads. He didn't always slide. He put himself in positions to get hurt. And unfortunately he got hurt and it derailed him. The comment he made about he didn't know how to game plan around him because he never had a quarterback like him who could run and throw. Well, I don't know about throwing, because the whole MO was when they wanted you to be they wanted to be a pocket passer, you couldn't do it. So I don't understand where the throwing comes in, because you were given the opportunity to be a pocket passer and you just couldn't do it. And that's why Kirk Cousins came in and subsequently took your job. So he kind of gives off a vibe of being a diva. He really does. This whole, it's your fault. He blamed Mike Shanahan. Now he's blaming Jay Gruden. Take some responsibility, man. You did not take the proper measures to protect yourself. And Tom Brady made a comment not too long ago, I think a couple of months ago, talking about the current state of the game where, a lot of guys, they're trying to change the rules every 5 minutes. But here's the thing. You need to learn how to protect yourself, and you need to learn how to protect the guys around you. Now, he was talking about, and Tom Brady was talking about how if you look at receivers, that's why you don't throw across the middle or you take certain routes or throws, because you try to protect those guys. So you got to learn how to protect yourself and learn to protect the people around you. And so I think he needs to take a little bit of blame, a little bit of responsibility for why his time in DC didn't pan out. It wasn't Jay Gruden's fault 100%. It wasn't Mike Shanahan's fault 100%. Dan Snyder, to me, had a lot to do with the blame. But, looking at responsibility, take responsibility, RG3. Like, stop it, man. You're bringing up stuff from 10 years ago. Like really? Like, you got to let that go, man. I mean, it's just, you're an analyst now. You're doing a great job doing so. Focus on your job and do the best you can. I know he's got a podcast now, so do your thing, man. Stop bringing up stuff from 10 years ago, because every one of us, man, walk around with woulda, coulda, shouldas. But look, you got to keep it moving. And so I don't know why they brought up a whole feud about 10 years ago, but to me personally, as a player, I like RG3. As a guy or an analyst, he comes off as a diva, most part, a lot. And I look at a lot of his tweets. And a lot of what he does on social media, man. And some of his takes are on point, but some of them are like, come on, man, what are you talking about? I mean, he gives off a whiff of diva. He needs to take responsibility. Your career here in DC was derailed not just by Jay Gruden or Mike Shanahan or Dan Snyder, but you got to take responsibility for what you did and didn't do as a player. So,
I mean, he was going to have this book, Surviving Washington, for crying out loud. This tell-all book, about how he survived Washington. And to your point, Brandon, here's the guy who was riding around in a limousine with the owner. Yeah. He was the owner's pick. I mean, let's just, tell it like it was. Mike Shanahan didn't want RG3. He wanted Kirk Cousins. And so he wound up drafting both guys. And it was a good move on Mike Shanahan's part to also draft Kirk Cousins. But by the time that Jay Gruden came to Washington, I mean, you already have RG3. He's in his third year with the team. Oh no, second year with the team. Yeah. I guess, and so he had an awful sophomore year. Many thought that he came back a little too early from that ACL, and possibly so. But then when he came back, he wanted to change up how he played the game. Yeah. All this, and he just was not that type of player. Yeah. He was honestly the biggest part of his type of playing was the RPO type of style of quarterback, running with the football, and quite frankly, the one thing I will agree with Robert Griffin III on was the fact that injury really robbed him from that spark. Oh yeah. Had he not had that injury, then because I mean you're seeing it in the NFL nowadays. Everybody runs the RPO, and it's very successful. So, had he not gotten that injury, he probably would have had more than one really good year. But he really, if you go back and look at some of his play in that first season, a lot of those passes were not on target. I mean, he had some good passes. But a lot of those passes were not on were not on target. So really wasn't that great of a passer. But regardless, the whole thing, and with Jay Gruden, when Jay Gruden gets on social media, he's probably having a couple of long necks. Excuse me. He's enjoying himself. He's watching football. He's just he's going to post what he's going to post online, and and RG3's like coming out and kind of starting something with them, and I'm like, oh, come on. I think that they probably could have handled this offline, but the long and short of it is, I'm kind of like with you. I agree with Jay Gruden for the most part. I don't think that Jay Gruden wanted RG3 in the first place. It was obvious. And 2015 came, and he's like, I'm riding with Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins turned into a fantastic quarterback for him. Yeah. And just goes to show you the style of quarterback. And that is true. I think Griffin said something like, you said that you couldn't handle a running quarterback. Well, I mean, might have been some truth to that, because, Kirk Cousins was a little bit more of your traditional drop back type of quarterback, and he
Yeah.
really excelled in Jay Gruden's offense. And RG3 just he couldn't, and then he went elsewhere and he couldn't handle it there either. I mean,
Yeah.
everywhere he went, he failed. So you can't really blame Jay Gruden. I mean, if RG3 was able to go in there and play just as good and Jay Gruden's offense is what he did in Mike Shanahan's offense or Kyle Shanahan's offense that first rookie season, there would have been no talk about that. But they're just it's a whole snapshot of that whole era of the Dan Snyder era and how toxic that all of that was. And I'm so glad to be rid of all of that. And hopefully, with Josh Harris and company, we won't have to worry about any of that anymore. So, that's a good segue into now that we're, of course, we're interviewing other head coaches. Eric Benemy, he was interviewed, and they said that it was a really excellent interview, very detailed interview. And I know you're going to have half the people, you're going to have 50% of the people who are going to be like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it was a good interview. I want to hear that it was a horrible interview. I want a clean slate. I don't want to have anything to do with what happened last year. So nothing more about Eric Bieniemy or Ron Rivera or any of those guys. I want somebody new. I want my Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald or anybody like that. I don't want Eric Bieniemy. And then the other 50 are like, he deserves a chance at being a head coach. And if he had an excellent interview, then why not give him that opportunity in Washington? He's already here.
Yeah.
He's already gotten his offense installed in Washington. He already knows the players. Now, whether or not if some of the players like him, I don't know. But why not Eric Bieniemy? I'm indifferent. I can only go with what I've heard, and I'm not there at Commanders Park or whatever it's called nowadays, so I don't know. But Brandon, I don't think that people should really get too worked up over this interview with Eric Bieniemy because, I mean, for one thing, we got Raheem Morris and Dan Quinn coming back in for second interviews.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people who are like, I do not want Dan Quinn in Washington. There's, people are a little indifferent with Raheem Morris. I think Raheem Morris is a solid coach.
Oh, yeah.
So, Eric Benemy, do you think he has a shot of actually getting the head coaching position in Washington?
I would say he does have a chance, and I'll tell you why. Because right now, obviously, my first two choices would obviously be McDonald from Baltimore and obviously Ben Johnson for the Detroit Lions. But Ben Johnson has a lot of people trying to get him, man. So we definitely have competition for Ben Johnson. I think McDonald is a realistic option too. I know there was reports that they were leaning towards a defensive-minded coach. But looking at Eric Bieniemy, I'll say this: has he really wowed me as a coordinator yet? He was kind of inconsistent up and down. I didn't really feel like he utilized the players we had. I felt like he was using a lot of the offense he had in Kansas City, and he just didn't have the personnel to implement it here in DC. So I really felt like he needed to utilize the type of weapons and what their strong suits were and in DC. But I'll say this: his hard approach, disciplinarian, I think would be something that is much needed in DC. I'm an old school guy. I'm used to growing up watching old school coaches where they got in your face, they demanded a lot. But if you look at a lot of these coaches, man, they got a lot out of their players. The fact that if you look at Ron Rivera, and I'm not trying to kick a guy down on the way out, man, but I'll say this: I never really was a supporter of the whole players coach approach because you got to have discipline. And you're looking at the other teams in the DMV, as far as like the Wizards, you're dealing with a locker room where the coach doesn't have control. The coach has to be that guy that has control of the locker room. And I didn't feel like Ron Rivera had that. Guys kind of did whatever he wanted. Look at Chase Young. Chase Young did whatever he wanted. He came to work out whenever he wanted. I mean, there was no control. There was no discipline. There was no accountability. So I think that he will provide that. Now, the fact that guys were complaining that it was too hard, I think that said a lot about what the culture was like in DC. You know, it was a little too soft, in my opinion. You know, you need to hold guys accountable. So I think that he definitely checks that box. Now, if he indeed, because our candidates get hired by other people because they outprice us, and I don't see that happening because I think Josh Harris is going to spend the amount of money necessary to obtain Ben Johnson or Mike Macdonald. But if we don't get these two and he's a choice, then you got to put coordinators in there that can support him, that can kind of shore up his shortcomings. You know what I mean? As far as play calling, as far as other areas that he needs to work on. So if he ends up being a guy, he needs a strong supporting cast. But yeah, I mean, you got to at least give him an interview. Now, do I think he's going to get hired as head coach? No. I mean, he could be retained as a coordinator, offensive coordinator, or I know Chicago was looking at him. Atlanta would kind of mention him, but I think that Belichick and Harbaugh have more friction as far as getting the job in Atlanta right now. So I don't think he's going to get the job. I think it's going to come down to Mike McDonald and Ben Johnson, in my opinion. And I have no problem with him settling in as an offensive coordinator, but like I said, he's got to utilize, and he has to use the strong suit of the guys he has. It's not Kansas City anymore. You've got to run the ball. And, we have a rich tradition in DC with running backs. We go way back. I mean, you can go way, way back. I mean, you got John Riggins. I mean, Larry Brown. I mean, there's so many different running backs we've had. Clinton Portis. I mean, long list of them. Football tradition tells you that the run sets up the pass. And we had Sam Howell drop back an ungodly amount of times this year. And to me, it was not necessary because we had a running back at Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson that could pick up the slack on the running game. So, yeah, I think if he's retained as offensive coordinator, he has to utilize the guys he has and start finding guys to implement in the system. It's because we were just talking about, kind of going back to the whole RG3 and Jay Gruden thing. Dan Snyder threw money at anybody and expected them to be successful without looking at all the variables involved, which is the right system, the right fit, the right coaching. I mean, what your strengths are as a player, because you're a deep threat doesn't mean you can slide into another system and be a slot. You got to utilize the guys who fit your system. And he never did that. He always chose quarterbacks whenever he wanted to. Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace. Was he the best pick? I don't think so. That was his pick when I felt like we had other needs. And, only 1 year at Ohio State, I thought was a red flag. So, it all comes down to fit. You got to have the right personnel for the right system. So I think that for Eric Bieniemy to be successful in DC, whether it's an offensive coordinator or head coach, give him the right pieces, and go from there. Because Jack Del Rio, I mean, say whatever you want about him. Did he exactly have the right personnel for the right system as far as the defensive side of the ball? I don't think so. William Jackson III was the wrong fit as a free agent pickup, and the list goes on when you got the coaches, the GM, Emmanuel Forbes, and that's a whole nother episode talking about the bad fits. But you see what I'm saying? It's like the fits, you got to have the right fit. Emmanuel Forbes wasn't the right fit. Christian Gonzalez was the right fit. Jamie Davis was not the right fit for the system. Somebody else would have been a better fit. So you got to find it. It's like a puzzle, man. Find the right pieces to fit the system. And I think we will be all right regardless. And it's just finding the right personnel. So.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think too, that's the other thing that we should also remind ourselves, even with some of the hot leading candidates.
Yeah.
The Ben Johnsons and the Mike McDonald's. Still learning the English language, folks. Is that we know what they can do individually. We know that as coordinators, as defensive coordinators, as offensive coordinators, we know what they can do. But the thing is, do we know how that they can build a coaching staff? Because that's part of it as well. Do they already have an idea of who they would bring on with them as a coaching staff? That's going to be a huge thing. Now they may be able to take on that role, like a lot of offensive coordinators usually do when they become head coaches. They're able to kind of maintain that offensive coordinator role. They'll still have somebody in there, but they'll kind of continue to, make play calls and things like that.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get away with that, but you still got to be able to know who is the best as far as the defensive side of the ball, who are going to be my special teams guys, as far as my position coaches, things like that. I mean, you got to be able to know how to fill out your coaching staff. So that's what I need to know as far as Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald. And I'm sure that's probably something that was asked in their interview as well. Is like, if we hire you, who are you bringing along with you as far as your coaching staff? You already have that together. And that would be very interesting to know who would Eric Benemy, if he was going to stay on and be the head coach of the Washington Commanders. We all know that, okay, he already has kind of the offensive side of the ball. We already know that he pretty much owned half of the team, right? He was the assistant head coach. So who would he bring in on the defensive side? That's something I would kind of like to know. Who would he bring in? Who would he bring in for special teams? Does he already have those folks in mind? You would think that for the last few years, people are talking about, he needs to have a shot at being a head coach, that he would have already kind of thought about that and just waiting for his chance.
Yeah.
So these are things you got to, you have to think about. And then to your point, talking about knowing how to choose the right players to fit what you're trying to do. Luckily, a lot of that has to do with your general manager, your scouting team, and things like that. It's one thing that Joe Gibbs talked about with Bobby Beathard. He's like, he told Bobby Beathard the type of players he needed. Now, of course, Gibbs had an input as well, but a lot of times he said, Bobby Beathard, I need this type of guy in this position. Bobby Beathard went out and got those players for Joe Gibbs. So he relied on his general manager to be able to bring those guys in. We're hoping that Adam Peters is going to be that type of guy that's going to be able to bring in the right players to fit what someone like maybe Eric Benemy would institute. Now, that then becomes the question of, okay, the quarterback position, right? Because I'm going to be coming out with some videos talking about that number 2 pick, a quarterback. Who do we need to get? We also got to look at that type of offense, because you need the right fit for whatever offense you're going to institute. If it's going to be heavily RPO offense, then you really want someone who's going to be that dual threat. And if that's the case, you're looking at somebody like Jalen Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Drake May in Carolina. I mean, they ran a lot of that too, and he's athletic. He can run, but Daniels is a lot more athletic, and he's a lot more exciting to watch. I mean, he's almost like, dare I say it, he reminds me a lot of RG3 when it comes to that, because that guy can run. He can flat out run. And I'm also going to be doing a video kind of breaking down some of these guys. Brandon, we'll have to get together with that as well. But overall, I think the point I'm trying to tie all this back in is the fact that whenever we're talking about these draft picks, whatever coach that comes in, if it's offensive minded coach or offensive coordinator turned head coach, say it's Ben Johnson, let's look at what offense that Detroit is running right now. Is that type of offense, is that conducive to someone like, is it better suited for Drake May? Is it better suited for Daniels or Caleb Williams if somehow for some ungodly reason he's not drafted at number 1? Who is it best suited for? Because that's the thing. The best quarterback may not always be the best for your type of offense, and you want the guys who are going to fit your style. And I'll just say this, and I'll leave it at this. So one thing that I've been very excited about watching the playoffs is the fact that I've seen a lot of traditional style of offenses being ran in the playoffs. And it's one thing that people don't realize, that the teams that have been winning in the playoffs have been teams that have been able to run the football. Everyone's been so preoccupied with the quarterback position, they have forgotten the fact that the teams that have been able to get, past the wild card round, been able to get into the championship rounds, are teams that can run the football. Now, it's either your quarterback can run the football, or both your quarterback and the running back can run the football, or you just have a really good running game. Some of these teams can, they have their quarterback under center more traditionally. They're able to, hand off to the running back. He gets a full steam ahead of him. I've seen a lot more of that in the playoffs than what I've had, like watching our offense all year long. So I said all that to say that, we're looking at some of these quarterbacks who traditionally come out of like, these option style of college offenses, one read offenses, things like that. They tend to make a lot of plays with their legs and things like that. But if we wind up installing a more traditional type of offense, we need a quarterback that's going to be able to drop back and pass. We need a quarterback that can be comfortable being under center and not just being in the pistol or not just being in a shotgun formation 98% of the time. And so that's when you start looking at that, that's when you really have to start looking at who are the quarterbacks that are available in the draft or in free agency, because you need quarterbacks that are going to fit. You can't just pick just because, hey, this guy's at this position, or, we're going to pick this guy at number 2, even though that maybe he's not going to be the right pick for us.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying, folks, I am not saying that none of these quarterbacks in the top 5 are right for us. I ain't saying that at all. I'm just, again, it's devil's advocate. But really, once we find out who our coach is going to be, I think then you start to look at what type of offense is going to be installed. And then that's when you really need to start looking at the draft and free agency. And you really need to start looking at, okay, we got to get the right personnel. You can't just get any person. It takes a certain type of personnel. That's the reason why Joe Gibbs teams all through the years, you never necessarily had the best players at every position.
Yeah.
But you had the right players in those positions. It's the reason why that Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It's the reason why he didn't have a Tony Dorsett. He had John Riggins, but he didn't have a Tony Dorsett back there. He didn't have Herschel Walker. It didn't have Barry Sanders back there. We had Art Monk. We had Gary Clark. Guys like that. People will argue that Jerry Rice was better. So we didn't have like all pro, Hall of Fame. Well, Art Monk was Hall of Fame, but it took a long time to get him into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
Point I'm making, folks, is I want the right players in the right positions for the right fit of system that we're going to be in on both sides of the football. And I want a total team built from the inside out. I want a team that is so deep in every position that they're going to be so dominant. You will have to look very hard to find a weakness. And that's why you'll hear me say in some upcoming videos that you can't look at just the quarterback position and say, that is, we get the quarterback that is 50-60% of what you needed already out. No, that's one position. I know the quarterback position is one of the most important positions, but it's still, I want a dominant team. We deserve it. It's been 30 years. We deserve it, folks. We now are with Dallas as having the longest drought of being in the championship team or the championship game. We have got to beat Dallas to that. We can't be the last team to have the longest drought. That's all I'm going to say. I'm done.
Nah, I mean, we definitely cannot let them. Yeah, we definitely got to short it up. But I mean, you make some good points, man. I mean, quarterback has to be the right fit, and again, it's kind of like both subjects kind of feed off each other. RG3 wasn't the best fit. We gave up the world for him, including I believe Aaron Donald was a pick that we gave away, and he's had a really good career. And I mean, he's just a monster, man, all pro. So he's got to be the right fit. I agree with you. And getting back to Eric Benemy, a resume counts, Like if you haven't found your way as a coordinator, I'm not going to promote you to head coach, and that's just where I'm coming from. I like EB, and I love the discipline. I'm a disciplinarian. I'm a military guy. I believe in discipline, but I think that would definitely be good, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But we need somebody who's going to do that for the defensive side too. Like I think Mike McDonald would be a really good pick because we need to build a culture on the defense. I mean, defense. Here's the thing, and you mentioned, everybody expects quarterback, and if you pick the right one, you're good. No, our O-line, culture, defense, so many things go into creating the best atmosphere for a young quarterback to succeed. And defense is one of them. We got to instill a nasty attitude on defense. We need some dogs on the defensive side because our defense is hurting. We still need the number one corner. We need a middle linebacker. We need a lot of work. So we need the guys going to instill a defensive attitude on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the biggest thing here, man, is that we have choices. We haven't always had choices. We've kind of had whatever we have, and we dealt with it, and we made little moves here and there. Or under the Snyder era, we just threw money at problems and expected to go away. But now we have a think tank in the front office where we have a new owner who's willing to do whatever it takes to improve this team and bring it back to glory. We have a GM who he's going to be a really good GM. He's going to rebuild this team. We have $90 million, and that's just the minimum right now because it can go up to 100 really, and certain moves are made of cap room. We have 4 picks in the first 100 picks, so we have the capability to rebuild the team in a relatively short amount of time. Because look, Josh Harris said, "Look, I'm not really trying to rebuild. I'm here trying to compete." And there's a lot of turmoil going on in the division, man. Is Dak back in Dallas? Jalen Hurts. Is he the problem? Is it the coach? What did they do in Philly? Because that collapse it was epic. And New York, man, they're just a dumpster fire. So we could easily, if we make the right moves, compete in this division next year or the year after that. I fully believe that because all we need is the coach and the defensive coordinator. Now we are ready to roll and start making moves. So we have options, and that's something we have not always had. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think that they're going to make the right move. Honestly, I do think it's between Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald. I would not be upset at either one. Harbaugh, I don't. There hasn't been a lot of friction with him, and I don't see Belichick. Even though there's a lot of people who are just bound and determined to get Belichick in the burgundy gold. I don't want that to happen. He needs to step out of DC, man. So, so I think that Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald are 2 excellent choices. And Eric Benemy, look, I think he can be a good coordinator. The biggest thing is he needs to get out of Kansas City and come to DC formally. Like he's still running plays like he has Patrick Mahomes and a bunch of fast receivers out there. He's got to utilize this run game. We only got 750 running yards for our primary back. We need more than that. We need 1,000-yard back. So, there's a lot of choices need to be made. But next year, this is a very important offseason, but I think that next season is the most important season as far as underneath the Josh Harris regime because excuses are gone. We go in here, we fix the O-line, we fix the defense. The excuses are gone. You put a guy behind center, the excuses are gone. You cannot use the whole excuse that we have a bad O-line. They're going to shore everything up, but basically what Josh Harris is saying is I'm putting all the right pieces in the right places. Now there's no excuses anymore. You got to perform because to bring this fan base back, we've got to put a winning product on the field. It is really hard to be a Commanders fan and go to FedEx, man, because very often than not, 3/4 of the time, you're outnumbered. We have to bring those fans back because a lot of people I talk to, including yourself, man, from the glory days, the fan base was the power base that pushes franchise forward, man. The team fed off the fan base. This was probably the most vibrant fan base in sports. So we got to bring that back. And I think we're on the road to getting there, man. So, I mean, I think the message for everybody in closing is keep the faith, man, because there is a light in the tunnel. We're this close to being a better team than we were last year in the last 10 years, even in my opinion, the last 20 years. They're going to rebuild this team. They're going to put talent in the stadium. And I'm saying they're going to be a good team. Like I said, the NFC East, man, there's nothing guaranteed. Dak can't win a playoff game. I mean, Jalen Hurts, can he throw a daggone ball? I mean, Daniel Jones, he's it for the Giants, which is good for us because he's trash. So we'll see.
I tell you, Brandon doesn't pull any punches with the Giants. You can tell how much love he has for the Giants.
No love.
Yeah, folks, we're almost up against 35 minutes, so I think both of us are going to call it a day on this one. But yeah, folks, I'm telling you, like Brandon said, keep the faith. Um, and just remember, as soon as we get the coach, we're going to know a little bit more about what's going to be instituted here in Washington. And we'll probably be able to know a little bit more of what we need as far as the players. I mean, we already kind of know what we need, but,
Yeah.
the type of players who we think is really going to fit. And we'll have videos discussing that. We're not experts, so we don't know. If we were experts, man, we would be working for the Commanders. We're not working for them yet, but Josh Harris, I'm going to send you my resume here in a little bit. But anyway, folks, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, give it a share. Just let us know how we did. Just keep it respectful. Don't do personal stuff, man. Just keep it respectful. Just talk football, man. With that said, we will see you in the next one. Take care. Hail to the Washington Commanders. Peace.
Peace.